From her scandalous Hollywood affairs with married co-stars to disguising herself as a nurse to visit JFK in the hospital, Grace Kelly's real life was far more shocking than her pristine princess image. Behind the white gloves and royal crown hid secrets of fertility tests, million-dollar dowries, and a voice coaches called nasal and improperly placed. Here are 15 things you never knew about Grace Kelly. Fact 1. Her first TV commercial was spraying bug spray. Before Grace Kelly became the epitome of Hollywood elegance and eventually a real-life princess, her very first television commercial was about as unglamorous as you could imagine. In 1948, a young Grace Kelly appeared on screen, spraying insecticide around a room for the Bridgeport Brass Company, wielding a can of bug spray with the same poise she would later bring to Alfred Hitchcock thrillers. This early modeling job was one of several commercial gigs Kelly took on while studying at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York. At the time, she was working her way through drama school as a commercial model, earning about $400 per week through the John Robert Powers Agency. The insecticide commercial was part of a series of decidedly ordinary advertising jobs that also included promoting cigarettes and other household products, a far cry from the sophisticated fashion campaigns and luxury brands she would later be associated with. What makes this fact even more amusing is the contrast between that early commercial and Kelly's later image as the pristine princess of Monaco. The woman who would go on to epitomize grace and sophistication, inspiring the naming of the famous Hermes Kelly bag and becoming a fashion icon for generations, started her career literally spraying bugs. Her modeling work at this time was purely commercial rather than high fashion, as she had no interest in becoming a fashion model and was simply using these jobs to pay for her acting education. The irony wasn't lost on those who knew her during this period. Friends and fellow students at the Barbizon Hotel for Women, where she lived during her New York years, would later marvel at the transformation from the girl spraying insecticide in commercials to the woman who would grace the covers of magazines worldwide and eventually wear a crown. Fact 2. Drama school called her voice nasal and improperly placed. When Grace Kelly auditioned for the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, the admissions officers were brutally honest about what they heard. They characterized her voice as being nasal and improperly placed, which was essentially their polite way of saying she sounded terrible. This harsh critique came as a shock to the young woman from Philadelphia, who had dreams of becoming a serious actress. But it also set her on a path that would completely transform how she spoke. The voice problems weren't entirely surprising given Kelly's background. As a child, she had suffered from chronic sinus issues that gave her what was described as a thin nasal voice from years of sinus problems. Growing up in Philadelphia, she also had a distinct regional accent that was considered unsuitable for the refined roles she hoped to play on stage and screen. The combination of these vocal challenges meant that despite her natural beauty and acting instincts, her voice could have been a major barrier to her career. Determined to overcome these limitations, Kelly threw herself into extensive speech lessons and vocal coaching while at the academy. She used a tape recorder to practice and monitor her progress, working tirelessly to bring her voice down in pitch, achieve clarity and depth, and eliminate her Philadelphia accent. The intensive training paid off, but perhaps not in the way anyone expected. Instead of developing a standard American theatrical voice, Kelly emerged with what became her signature sound. A slightly British accent that was measured, well-rounded, and incredibly sophisticated. The transformation was so complete that her own family teased her mercilessly about her new way of speaking when she returned home to Philadelphia. Many Hollywood directors and casting agents continued to find her voice unconventional, even after all the training. But that distinctive vocal quality became part of what made Grace Kelly so memorable and unique as a performer. Fact 3. She disguised herself as a nurse for JFK. In 1954, Grace Kelly pulled off one of the most unusual hospital visits in political history when she disguised herself as a nurse to sneak into a hospital and visit the future president of the United States. Jack Kennedy was laid up with serious back problems that required hospitalization, and his wife Jackie Kennedy came up with an elaborate plan to cheer him up during his recovery. The Kennedy family had maintained a long-term friendship with Grace Kelly, and Jackie knew that a visit from the glamorous Hollywood star would lift Jack's spirits during what was undoubtedly a boring and painful hospital stay. However, there was one major problem with this plan. Hospitals in the 1950s had strict visiting policies, and having a famous actress waltz through the halls would have caused a media circus that the Kennedys definitely wanted to avoid. Jackie's solution was both creative and risky. She arranged for Grace to dress up in a complete nurse's uniform, complete with the traditional white cap and medical attire that would allow her to blend in with the actual hospital staff. The disguise worked perfectly, and Grace was able to walk through the hospital corridors without being recognized by other patients, visitors, or hospital personnel who might have spotted the famous face that was already appearing regularly in magazines and on movie screens. The secret mission was apparently a complete success, with Grace managing to spend time with the future president without anyone discovering the deception. This incident shows not only the close personal relationship between the Kelly and Kennedy families, but also Grace's willingness to go to unusual lengths for her friends, even if it meant temporarily trading her glamorous Hollywood image for a medical uniform. The story also reveals Jackie Kennedy's early skills at managing public relations and keeping private family matters out of the spotlight. Fact 4. Her family paid a $2 million dowry. When Grace Kelly became engaged to Prince Rainier III of Monaco, her family discovered that marrying into royalty came with a price tag that would make even wealthy people think twice. The royal family of Monaco required a dowry of $2 million, which in 1956 was an absolutely staggering amount of money that would be equivalent to nearly $20 million today. The demand for such an enormous dowry wasn't just about tradition or ceremony. Monaco was facing serious financial difficulties after World War II had devastated the resort-based economy that the tiny principality depended on. The famous Monte Carlo casinos weren't bringing in the wealthy tourists they once had, and Prince Rainier desperately needed an injection of cash to keep the country afloat. Marrying a Hollywood star would bring publicity and glamour back to Monaco, but it would also require the bride's family to literally pay for the privilege. Jack Kelly, Grace's father, was reportedly outraged by this demand and initially refused to pay what he saw as an insulting requirement. Despite being a self-made millionaire from his successful brickwork contracting business, Kelly was a proud man who allegedly said, "My daughter doesn't have to pay any man to marry her." The idea that his accomplished and beautiful daughter should come with a financial payment struck him as completely backward and offensive. However, the business reality of royal marriages eventually won out over personal pride. The Kelly family understood that this wasn't just a wedding but essentially a merger between American wealth and European nobility. After much negotiation and consideration, Jack Kelly eventually agreed to pay the $2 million dowry, though he reportedly remained bitter about the requirement. The payment ensured that Grace could become Princess Grace of Monaco, but it also meant that her fairy tale romance came with a very real and very expensive price tag. Fact 5. Monaco banned all her movies after marriage. When Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier III in 1956, she agreed to give up her acting career completely, but her new husband took this retirement much more seriously than anyone could have imagined. Prince Rainier was so determined to erase Grace's Hollywood past that he actually banned all of her movies from being shown anywhere in Monaco, making it impossible for the citizens of the tiny principality to watch their new princess on screen. This dramatic decision meant that classic films like Rear Window, To Catch a Thief, and High Noon were completely off-limits in Monaco theaters and could not be broadcast on television within the country's borders. The ban extended to all 11 of the major films Grace had made during her brief but successful Hollywood career, effectively wiping out any trace of her previous life as an actress from the official entertainment options available to Monaco residents. The reasoning behind this unusual policy seems to have been Prince Rainier's belief that seeing Princess Grace in romantic scenes with other men, or watching her play characters that might be considered beneath royal dignity, would somehow diminish her status as a member of the royal family. He wanted the people of Monaco to think of Grace only as their princess, not as the Hollywood actress who had kissed leading men like Cary Grant and Jimmy Stewart on screen just a few years earlier. This ban became particularly awkward when Alfred Hitchcock, Grace's favorite director, continued trying to lure her back to Hollywood for one final film. The movie ban made it clear that Prince Rainier had no intention of allowing his wife to return to acting, even for special projects or one-time appearances. The policy remained in effect throughout Grace's lifetime, meaning that for over 25 years, the people of Monaco were officially prevented from watching the films that had made their princess famous around the world. Fact 6. Her father called acting a slim cut above streetwalker. Grace Kelly's path to Hollywood stardom was anything but smooth, especially when it came to getting support from her own family. Her father, Jack Kelly, was so opposed to her acting ambitions that he reportedly described the acting profession as being a slim cut above streetwalker, which was his harsh way of saying he thought actresses were barely more respectable women who sold their bodies on the street. This brutal assessment came from a man who had built his reputation on respectability and hard work. Jack Kelly was a self-made millionaire who had earned his fortune through his brickwork contracting business and had achieved international fame as an Olympic rowing champion with 3 gold medals to his name. He had worked tirelessly to establish himself as a prominent figure in Philadelphia society, and the idea of his daughter entering what he saw as a disreputable profession was absolutely horrifying to him. The irony of Jack Kelly's attitude becomes even more striking when you consider that acting actually ran in the Kelly family. 2 of Grace's uncles were already established in the entertainment world. George Kelly was a Pulitzer Prize-winning playwright who had achieved serious literary recognition, and Walter Kelly was a successful vaudeville performer who had also appeared in films for major studios like Paramount Pictures and Metro-Goldwyn-Mayer. Despite having family members who had found success and respectability in the entertainment industry, Jack Kelly remained convinced that acting was an unsuitable career for his daughter. Grace's determination to pursue acting despite her father's vehement disapproval shows just how strong-willed she was. Even as a young woman, she defied her parents' wishes by enrolling in the American Academy of Dramatic Arts in New York, and she had to work her way through school as a commercial model because her family refused to financially support what they saw as a foolish and potentially scandalous career choice. Fact 7. She had affairs with multiple married co-stars. Throughout her brief but meteoric Hollywood career, Grace Kelly developed a reputation behind the scenes for having romantic relationships with many of her leading men, most of whom happened to be married and significantly older than she was. This pattern of attraction to unavailable co-stars became so well known in Hollywood circles that it contradicted the wholesome, pristine image that the studios were carefully crafting for public consumption. The list of Grace's rumored romantic partners reads like a who's who of Hollywood's biggest stars from the 1950s. She was reportedly involved with Gary Cooper during the filming of High Noon, when Cooper was married and 28 years her senior. During the production of Mogambo, she allegedly had a relationship with Clark Gable, another married leading man who was old enough to be her father. Ray Milland, her co-star in Dial M for Murder, was also reportedly romantically linked to Grace despite being married for more than 20 years at the time. Even Bing Crosby, who starred with Grace in both The Country Girl and High Society, was rumored to have had a relationship with her, and he apparently proposed marriage to Grace after they finished working on The Country Girl. The pattern was so consistent that Hollywood insiders began to take notice, and some of Grace's fellow actresses made pointed comments about her romantic adventures with married men. What made these relationships particularly scandalous for the 1950s was not just that Grace was unmarried and dating older men, but that she seemed to have a specific preference for co-stars who were already committed to other women. This behavior was completely at odds with the image of Grace as a refined, well-bred young lady from a good Philadelphia family, and it created a stark contrast between her public persona and her private life. The studios and publicity departments worked hard to keep these stories out of the press, understanding that such revelations could have seriously damaged Grace's career and marketability. Fact 8. Gary Cooper said she had a passionate hidden side. Gary Cooper, Grace Kelly's co-star in the classic Western High Noon, made some revealing comments about her personality that showed there was much more to the future princess than her cool, sophisticated public image suggested. Cooper, who was known for being straightforward and honest in his assessments of fellow actors, observed that Grace had a surprisingly passionate and fiery nature that was completely hidden beneath her refined exterior. This contrast between Grace's public persona and her private personality fascinated Cooper, who had worked with many of Hollywood's biggest stars during his long and successful career. He noted that while Grace appeared to be the perfect example of a well-bred, controlled young lady from a good family, there was an intensity and emotional depth to her that most people never got to see. Cooper's observations were particularly noteworthy because he was not someone who typically gossiped about his co-stars or made dramatic statements about their personal lives. The fact that Cooper chose to comment on this aspect of Grace's personality suggests that the difference between her public and private selves was quite striking to those who worked closely with her. During the filming of High Noon in 1952, Grace was still relatively new to Hollywood and was working hard to establish herself as a serious actress, so she may have been particularly careful to maintain a proper and professional image on set. Cooper's insights help explain why Grace became such a compelling actress despite having a relatively short career before she retired to become Princess of Monaco. Her ability to project both coolness and underlying passion made her perfect for the complex roles that directors like Alfred Hitchcock would later create for her. The tension between her controlled exterior and her hidden emotional intensity became one of the key elements that made Grace Kelly such a memorable and effective performer, even though most audiences never realized this duality existed. Fact 9. Her wedding dress had a good luck penny in the shoe. Grace Kelly's wedding shoes contained a secret good luck charm that most people never knew about, and they also debunk one of the most persistent myths about her royal wedding day. The shoes that accompanied her stunning wedding dress were designed by David Evans for his New York company, and hidden inside the right shoe was a copper penny that had been built directly into the sole for good luck. This charming detail was just one of many carefully planned elements that went into what many people called the wedding of the century. When Grace married Prince Rainier III of Monaco on April 19, 1956. The penny tradition was a sweet nod to the old saying about finding a penny for good luck, and it showed that even in the midst of all the royal protocol and formal ceremony, Grace wanted to include some personal touches that reflected her American background and superstitions. But perhaps even more surprising than the hidden penny is what the shoes reveal about a long-standing misconception regarding Grace's wedding day appearance. For decades, people have believed and repeated the story that Grace deliberately wore flat shoes so that she wouldn't tower over her new husband, Prince Rainier, who was not particularly tall. This supposed gesture of consideration for the prince's height has been cited countless times as an example of Grace's thoughtfulness and royal protocol. However, the truth is completely different from this romantic story. Grace's wedding shoes actually had 2.5-inch heels, which means she was definitely not trying to minimize her height on her wedding day. The myth about the flat shoes has persisted for so long that it's become accepted as fact in many accounts of the royal wedding, but the actual shoes prove that Grace was perfectly comfortable being her full height as she walked down the aisle to become Princess Grace of Monaco. Fact 10. She danced topless at the Barbizon Hotel. During her years living at the Barbizon Hotel for Women in Manhattan, Grace Kelly revealed a surprisingly rebellious side that would have shocked anyone who only knew her from her later pristine princess image. The future Princess of Monaco was reportedly fond of dancing to Hawaiian music down the hallways of the prestigious women-only hotel, and she had a habit of shocking her fellow residents by performing these impromptu dance sessions while topless. The Barbizon Hotel for Women was supposed to be a safe and respectable place where young ladies from good families could live while pursuing their careers in New York City, with strict rules designed to protect residents from what were considered the corrupting influences of big city life. Men weren't allowed above the main floor, and the entire building was exclusively set aside for women who were expected to maintain proper decorum at all times. Grace lived at the Barbizon at her father's insistence, while she was studying at the American Academy of Dramatic Arts and working as a commercial model to pay her way through school. Her fellow residents included other young women who would later become famous, such as Liza Minnelli and Ali MacGraw. But even in this group of ambitious and independent women, Grace's behavior stood out as particularly bold. According to biographical accounts, Grace's rebellious streak really showed up during her Barbizon years, and she broke a lot of the hotel's rules with her unconventional behavior. The topless dancing to Hawaiian music was just one example of how she was beginning to push back against the rigid expectations that had been placed on her throughout her sheltered childhood in Philadelphia. This wild side of her personality was something that most people never saw, as she learned to present a much more controlled and sophisticated image once her acting career began to take off. Fact 11. Her brother gave her his Olympic medal as wedding gift. Grace Kelly received one of the most unique and meaningful wedding gifts imaginable when her brother John Kelly Jr. gave her his Olympic bronze medal as a present for her marriage to Prince Rainier of Monaco. The timing of this gift was particularly special because John had just won the medal at the 1956 Olympics in Melbourne, Australia, the same year that Grace was getting married. John Kelly Jr. was a formidable athlete in his own right, who had followed in their father's footsteps to become an accomplished rower. He competed in an incredible 4 consecutive Olympic Games, participating in 1948, 1952, 1956, and 1960, which shows just how dedicated and talented he was as an athlete. His persistence finally paid off in Melbourne when he won the bronze medal in single sculls, achieving the Olympic success that had taken him years of training and competition to reach. The Kelly family had an impressive athletic pedigree that made John's Olympic achievement even more meaningful. Their father, Jack Kelly Sr., had been a rowing champion who won 3 Olympic gold medals in the 1920s, so competitive rowing was practically in their blood. John Jr. had been working toward his own Olympic medal for years, making multiple attempts and coming close several times before finally breaking through with his bronze medal performance. The decision to give this hard-earned medal to his sister as a wedding gift shows the close relationship between Grace and John, and also demonstrates how the family viewed her marriage to Prince Rainier as a historic achievement worthy of such a significant sacrifice. For an Olympic athlete to give away the medal they had worked so hard to earn represents an extraordinary gesture of love and support, making this one of the most touching and personal wedding gifts that Grace received during her transformation from Hollywood actress to European royalty. Fact 12. She required a fertility test. Before marriage, before Grace Kelly could marry Prince Rainier and become Princess of Monaco, she had to submit to one of the most unusual and invasive requirements of royal marriage, a mandatory fertility test to prove that she would be able to produce heirs to the throne. This eccentric tradition was considered absolutely essential by the Monaco royal family, because not producing an heir was simply not an option for the future princess. The fertility test requirement shows just how much royal marriages in the 1950s were still treated as business arrangements rather than romantic unions, even when the bride was a famous Hollywood actress who could have married anyone she chose. For the small Principality of Monaco, ensuring the continuation of the royal bloodline was a matter of national importance, and the royal family wasn't willing to take any chances on Grace's ability to have children. This medical examination would have been particularly uncomfortable and embarrassing for Grace, who came from a conservative Catholic family and had grown up in an era when such intimate medical procedures were rarely discussed openly. Having to prove her fertility to a group of royal doctors and advisors would have been a stark reminder that her marriage was not just a personal choice, but a duty that came with very specific expectations and requirements. The test was just one of several outdated traditions that Grace had to observe as part of her transition from American actress to European royalty. Along with giving up her American citizenship and agreeing never to act in films again, the fertility test represented the kind of old-fashioned royal protocol that most modern women would find completely unacceptable. However, Grace apparently passed the test without any problems, and she went on to fulfill the royal family's expectations by giving birth to 3 children: Princess Caroline, Prince Albert, and Princess Stephanie. Fact 13. She had to give up her American citizenship. When Grace Kelly married Prince Rainier III of Monaco in 1956, she was required to make one of the most significant personal sacrifices that many people don't realize came with her royal title. She had to completely renounce her American citizenship and give up her status as a United States citizen forever. This wasn't just a symbolic gesture or a temporary arrangement, but a permanent legal requirement that meant Grace could never again claim the rights and protections that came with being an American. The citizenship requirement was part of Monaco's strict laws regarding royal marriage and succession, which demanded that the prince's wife become a full citizen of Monaco with no divided loyalties to other countries. Unlike modern royal marriages where spouses often maintain dual citizenship or keep their original nationality, Monaco's rules in the 1950s were much more rigid and unforgiving about such matters. For someone who had been born and raised in Philadelphia and had built her entire career in the United States, giving up American citizenship represented a profound break with her past and her identity. Grace had grown up as the daughter of a prominent American family, had achieved fame and success as a Hollywood actress, and had deep roots in American society through her father's business connections and her family's social standing in Philadelphia. The decision to renounce her citizenship also meant that Grace was giving up practical benefits that most Americans take for granted, such as the right to vote in American elections, the ability to work freely in the United States without special permits, and the protection of American diplomatic services when traveling abroad. Once she became Princess Grace of Monaco, she was legally a foreign national if she ever visited the United States, even though it remained the country of her birth and the place where her family continued to live and work. Fact 14. Hitchcock tried to lure her back for Marnie. 6 years after Grace Kelly retired from acting to become Princess of Monaco, Alfred Hitchcock made one final attempt to bring his favorite leading lady back to Hollywood for what would have been the comeback of the century. In 1962, Hitchcock was planning his psychological thriller Marnie and desperately wanted Grace to play the title role of a compulsive thief who steals from her employers, which would have marked her triumphant return to the silver screen after years of royal duties. The role seemed perfect for Grace's particular blend of sophistication and hidden complexity that had made her such a compelling actress in films like Rear Window and To Catch a Thief. Hitchcock was so determined to work with Grace again that he personally approached her about the project, and initially, Princess Grace was interested in taking on this challenging role that would have allowed her to showcase her acting skills once more. The announcement that Princess Grace would return to acting created enormous excitement in Hollywood and around the world, with fans eager to see their beloved actress back on screen. In March of 1962, Monaco's palace spokesman officially announced that Princess Grace would indeed play the role in Marnie and then give up acting altogether, making this her final film performance. However, the citizens of Monaco had very different feelings about their princess returning to movies, especially to play a character who was a compulsive thief. The local press in Monaco blasted the idea of Princess Grace making a screen comeback, arguing that it would be undignified for royalty to portray a criminal character. The criticism became so intense that even France's President Charles de Gaulle supposedly pressured Prince Rainier to pull his wife out of the production, fearing it would make Monaco appear frivolous and damage the principality's reputation. By April, Grace announced she was withdrawing from the film due to what she diplomatically called scheduling difficulties. Fact 15. She created the Kelly bag while hiding her pregnancy. One of the most famous luxury handbags in the world got its name thanks to Grace Kelly's clever strategy for dealing with invasive paparazzi during her first pregnancy as Princess of Monaco. In 1956, while she was pregnant with her daughter Caroline, Princess Grace was constantly followed by photographers who were desperate to get pictures of her growing belly, so she began using a distinctive leather handbag from the French luxury brand Hermès as a shield to protect her privacy. The handbag in question was originally called the Sac à Dépêche by Hermès, and it was a structured leather purse that was large enough and sturdy enough to effectively block photographers' views of her pregnant abdomen. Grace would clutch this particular bag in front of her body whenever she appeared in public, creating a barrier between herself and the prying cameras that seemed to follow her everywhere she went during those early months of her royal marriage. The photographs of Princess Grace strategically holding this handbag became so common and so widely published in magazines and newspapers around the world that the bag itself became almost as famous as the princess who was carrying in it. Fashion photographers and style editors began to take notice of this elegant accessory that appeared in nearly every public photo of the new princess, and the bag's distinctive design started to attract attention from women who wanted to emulate Grace's sophisticated style. Hermès quickly recognized the incredible marketing opportunity that had been created by Princess Grace's frequent use of their handbag, and the company made the smart business decision to officially rename the purse in her honor. The Sac à Dépêche became the Kelly bag, and it has remained one of the most sought-after and expensive luxury handbags in the world ever since. What started as a practical solution to an annoying paparazzi problem accidentally created one of the most iconic fashion accessories of all time, ensuring that Grace Kelly's influence on style and luxury goods would continue long after her death.